Hi, I'm Dominic Harvey and welcome to How to Build an Employer Offer to Boost Tech Talent Attraction and Retention with CWJobs. I'm delighted to announce that I'm joined by three experts in this area, and we'll be running through the state of the UK tech market, as it says here, the findings of our research, where employers are potentially going wrong and maybe where they're going right, and also actionable advice to elevate your tech hiring strategy. And thereafter, some questions and answers from the panel and discussion. So without further ado, as I've said, I'm Dom Harvey. I'm the sales director of CWJobs. I've been here 19 years, and before that I was a recruiter in the tech market for 6 years. But I'm delighted to be joined by Sarah Woherem. Sarah, do you want to just give us a quick rundown of your background?
Yeah, hi Dom, thanks for having me. So my name is Sarah. I'm a technical recruiter at Vallum Associates. So I work mainly with software developers across the market, mainly, and also clients as well within the energy and commodity space.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much. Reace, welcome aboard. Do you want to just give us a rundown of your background?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Dom. So my name's Reace Wade. I work for BT. I work in the graduate and the apprenticeship space, looking after their programs for our networks and our digital space. So very much our tech offering within BT. I've been in this space for probably about 15 years now. And before that, I was actually on the ground in that field engineering type role myself. So that's me.
Excellent. Thank you. And Dilani, certainly the person with the most exciting job title, Engineer in Robotics. Do you want to just give us a little bit of your background?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Dilani Selvanathan. I'm a research and development engineer at Hertech a robotics company. And I am also a former software engineering degree apprentice from the BBC and Queen Mary University.
Excellent. Excellent. So let's move on and look at what's currently happening in the market. So we can see the trend of job postings across the last 3 years. I think everybody can guess what the big drop was, but it was interesting, I think, to see that it was actually barreling upwards before that, just before COVID hit, and we haven't actually reached those heights again, even though we certainly know that tech skills are in demand, but things coming back certainly to normal, and it remains to be seen if that remains the case across the year. Some interesting points as far as I saw it. The location is obviously post-pandemic. Location has completely changed. People are open to more international work, working remotely. There's part remote, part-time in the office, and only 4% said they prefer to be in the office 100% of the time. As far as DE&I is concerned, 65% of recruiters agree that bias is an issue in tech recruiting, and that unconscious bias leads to less diversity within the company, and all the things that can bring to the services and products that company can make. Companies have said that they are using skill-based assessment tools, implementing equal pay, and proactively scouring diverse talent. But I thought it was quite interesting in the recent PwC survey, only 3% of women said that a career in technology was their first choice, which I think is such a shame when hybrid working, flexible working has so much to offer and can kind of be blended into the home life demands of the current world. So there you go. That's pretty much a landscape of what's happening out there at the moment. What did we do? Well, we had a survey. Census-wide did a survey with 1,001 tech workers and 502 IT decision makers, and this was done earlier this year to really understand what they want in their career. And I'll jump into the findings that we can discuss. So certainly a lot of points raised on this slide. Flexible working, marginally more attractive to women, and certainly more attractive to the older community within the tech workforce. I don't think there's any huge surprises there. I think that between 18 and 34, you're learning your skills. You really want to be around people, but also still attracted to be working from home. But there's less of an attraction than there is for maybe the entrenched careerists within the tech community. And as it says there, 78% of tech workers surveyed agreed that the potential of career development is really, really important. And what we're seeing is that post-pandemic, unlike prior to the pandemic, when I think the tech workforce was known for jumping in somewhere, learning some skills and moving on, post-pandemic, that kind of feeling of stability, security, how is my company looking after me? How is my company looking after the society around it, has become much more important. And I think that one of the key points of this is, and other findings, is that the company has to really live and breathe what its policies are. But I suppose I'll kick things off really and say, were there any surprises in these stats? Reace, I'm not sure if you want to start, but what are your feelings when you first see this?
I think that there's nothing that I would say is anything that we're not hearing within our own business. If I'm completely honest with you, you're absolutely right about that age comparison to those that want to work at home to those that want to be back in the office. What I would say is we've seen, particularly in the younger generations, sort of those graduate, so apprenticeship sort of programs, where individuals have really almost missed out on that career transition from academia into that professional role. And so I think that really, if we were to even break it down further, maybe skewed even more so to the younger generation really wanting to be back in that workplace, if I'm honest.
Okay, would you agree with that, Dilani, having recently graduated and gone through that journey?
Yeah, I do agree. With like the experience that the younger people have, especially during the pandemic, all these students that have been doing everything online, they would be so used to doing that and expect when they go to a degree apprenticeship scheme or any apprenticeship scheme that's relating to tech, that they would offer something like working from home and the equipment needed to be able to do that instead of going into office during this time.
And Sarah, really to round off, what were your opinions on this? Are you seeing companies excel in areas and not so well in other areas with the companies you service?
Yes, I mean, in terms of the market, especially within the energy and commodities market, things like the bonus are such a big sort of factor for the candidates I work with. I mean, I speak to developers before I've even said my first sentence. They'll ask me if the role's fully remote. Like, they're really quite on it with the flexible working, and I don't blame them. I mean, coming out of a sort of pandemic as we have, being forced to work at home has made people sort of comfortable in that space. So I totally understand it. And then also in terms of the career progression as well, and the pension, I think they kind of go hand in hand. I think candidates are really thinking of the long term, as you said. I think it's because of the lack of stability that we've sort of had sort of through the pandemic. So having that sort of ability to build a career that you can stay in for the long term and develop your skills portfolio is definitely something that's really important. And a lot of my clients are sort of conforming to that and understanding what the market looks like, which is really good. Definitely makes my life easier.
Yeah,
for sure.
Reace, you mentioned something earlier about understanding what your workforce. How do you do that? Is it surveys? Is it continual one-to-ones? Or how do you gather that information to see where maybe you're going right, maybe where you're going wrong?
So we do an annual survey within the business. It's called the Your Say survey. And then our business units get a breakdown specifically for their business areas. Because BT, I guess, that there's lots of different skills within the business. Every area, I guess, have different or slight different nuances on their expectations, their demands, that they'd like to see from the business. So I think that gives a great opportunity for business units themselves to actually take a slightly different approach depending on how their workforce are feeling at that moment in time. Yeah,
I mean, such a huge company as BT as well. It must be a real job to get the full landscape, as it were, on what's actually happening. Sarah, are you seeing or hearing about some good practice from companies that do this? Is it the norm, or would you say it's something that needs to be ratcheted up in the tech workspace, or I suppose the general workspace, to understand what's happening. Sorry, unmute.
Sorry, yes. I was saying that I think it's quite good that, especially what Reace was saying about how they are doing sort of surveys to actually understand what the candidates want, what the talent actually wants, and I think having that ability to close that disconnect between the two sides is really important. In terms of my clients, I would say I'm not seeing as many doing the surveys. I think where we come in as a recruitment agency and recruitment consultants, we do consult with them on that and really tell them, look, this is what the market wants, and if you want the right talent, this is sort of where you need to align yourself to get the best talent out there. So I think it's good that I think a lot of companies are open to hearing, what is out there, what they can do to secure themselves in that position. Okay,
Dilani, I suppose actually working inside these companies, have you seen these? Do you think they're fit for purpose? Do you think you've had the outlet to give your opinion?
I know that with my manager was the apprenticeship scheme manager, so she would have every 3 months reviews to see how the scheme is everything's going well, if she can do anything to make our experience better. So anything to do with university, she would communicate our needs and things like that. So throughout the apprenticeship, we did actually get a lot of support, and anything that we weren't unhappy about, we would speak to our line manager and she would sort it out. But I also wanted to add one more point about career development. I feel like a lot of young people or companies that offer the apprenticeship schemes, in their job role, they always say after the apprenticeship, you might not have a guaranteed role. So then it just makes you think, if the role is not guaranteed and I'm not going to work for this company after I completed it, what's the point of me even applying for this company? So that's one of the things, even BBC had that mentioned as well. But
right.
At the end, because I performed really well, I did get offered a role, but I decided to move elsewhere.
Okay, interesting. I think the apprenticeship side of things can be, and I hate the phrase, it's almost overused, but a tick box exercise, because we've got an apprenticeship scheme and that kind of sits over there and we let it run and we see who comes off the out of that pipeline and who leaves. But I think that the companies that really succeed in it are the people that treat it seriously, put people into areas of work that's actually meaningful, and that's where I've seen companies really excel in it. And there's the other side, which is, well, we were just told to have an apprenticeship scheme. I mean, Reace, how do you make it live and breathe, as it were?
I'll be honest with you, Dom. I'm a little bit worried when I hear about anybody who tells me that they've got employers coming in as an apprentice, because they are employees, they're not apprentices, without a view of actually that future scope and as what are we doing with this individual in the future. Very much within our business, we will not employ an individual if it's not already aligned to a 5-year plan. So we make sure that our apprentices understand from day one, this is not just a job whilst you're an apprentice. There is a proper full-blown job aligned to that apprenticeship standard at the end of the programme. And I think that is absolutely critical. If you want the best out of the individual, if you want the full buy-in from the management, from that business unit to invest in that individual's future, then that's how you're successful in this space. Aside from the few individuals that, start an apprenticeship and it's not for them, we see a huge retention opportunity with apprenticeships in our business. Our apprentices stay with us beyond 5, 10, 15 years. We've got directors within the business that were apprentices, right? So I think once you really understand the value of apprenticeships, is what I would say, particularly the degree apprenticeships now, that they're more valuable in industry, for our industry particularly, than actually going to university and getting a degree. You've not only got the degree, but you've also got that real world experience for the business as well. So the value of degree apprenticeships is absolutely huge. But that's not putting aside the value of apprenticeships in industry, if they're executed correctly, are absolutely sublime.
Yeah, and as you were talking, I was realising that BT must have a huge heritage, not just in tech, but of apprenticeships anyway. So you've probably got an advantage over a lot of companies in terms of you've got a wealth of information on how to make these function, and certainly seem to be bucking the trend with 5, 10-year tenureships thereafter, and people on the board, etc. That's something really, really impressive.
I think one thing that I've not seen in any of this, the survey necessarily, and I know it's probably not been teased out, but for the apprenticeship, or whether it's even just a regular tech employee, I think one of the greatest values that we can actually have is actually a line manager. A line manager is what makes the difference to any individual in the tech space, whether that individual is invested in, feels listened to or not. And I think when you say about we've got a well-developed program within BT, I've got to take credit for nothing about our apprenticeship programs in BT, because it's actually down to the line managers, and the investment that the line managers put in these individuals is what makes it a success.
A really important point, and I think it goes to the old adage: you join a company, but you leave. You join because of the company, but you can sometimes leave because of the manager, but equally stay because of the manager, and that can be the glue, can't it? The special,
absolutely,
the additional point. Just lastly on this slide, really, do you think there is a huge difference between where workers are in their careers and what they want? Is it are post-50s workers really looking for things completely different to Gen Z, or are they just as hungry for new tech? Or do you see any kind of discernible differences in where they really focus their requirements? Or is it, broadly speaking, we are talking about a tech beast, and they're generally the same? What would you say to that, Sarah? And when you're speaking to different candidates, for example, do you know the pressure points or the buttons to press for somebody in one stage of their career rather than an earlier stage?
Yes, I think it's fairly even in terms of everyone definitely wants the flexible working, everyone wants the career progression. But I think as we look towards the slightly older in terms of the age comparison, I would say that the flexible working, as sort of said on the slide here, is definitely a really big thing and a huge deal breaker actually for a lot more people in that sort of generation. I think where there's a lot more with the slightly more junior sort of developers I work with anyways, I think they would obviously prefer a company that is providing the flexible working, but where they're a lot earlier in the career, I think they will go for an opportunity. They're more likely to go for an opportunity that may not be fully right, but they would like to grow and to get the experience, in my sort of findings anyways. But I think it's a much harsher deal breaker for the slightly older generation that I speak with anyways, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So a younger, will put themselves out of shape a little bit and go for maybe a 7 out of 10 job because the possibilities
Definitely.
of it. Whereas, somebody further down their career is, it's got to be a 9 or a 10. Yeah, exactly. Fair enough. And how about when you're actually within the BBC or your current role, Dilani, do you see a difference and a divide from maybe people that are further down their careers to what the Gen Z type are coming in? Is there a them and us feeling to it at all, or?
I kind of get that feeling, like when I joined, you could see that like the environment within the BBC, like based in London, a lot of the people that work there are quite older. Mm-hmm. There's a huge gap between like the people in their apprenticeship and grad scheme compared to like mid-tier or senior or like any principal engineers. And they seem to be more experienced and they've like stayed in the same company for like many years. But then I feel like with this generation, especially in Gen Z, they could get to like a principal level at a much faster pace because they could get that experience anywhere at any time. And so at the BBC it is quite different. Whereas when you go to a tech company or a startup, there's a lot more younger people working there.
Yeah. Okay. And Reace, are you kind of happy with the spread of age you've got in terms of building that culture that appeals across the age groups or career paths, or is that something really difficult to do?
I think we have that real inclusive culture, and I think it's something that we as an organisation are heavily investing in to enable not a younger generation and not an older generation, but to ensure that our culture across all age groups is the same culture. I think the beauty of it is that that older generation are actually realizing their value in being able to really develop and bring on that next generation. And that's what I think is really great to see, even in the respect that the value that they see for that younger generation coming in and plugging into a project and bringing a little bit of fresh thinking, fresh ideas. Actually, I'm going to challenge the norm a little bit here because I don't quite understand why you do that. I'm only asking a genuine question. And it helps the older generation go, do you know what? You're absolutely right. Let's actually turn the dial on this completely. And so I think that hand in glove working across the sort of generations for our space makes all the difference to that one inclusive culture, but also as to driving it to the next level. So yeah, really important. I think it's important to not create this shall we say, almost an artificial divide within our businesses and within our communities as well.
Yeah, and it seems like a very conscious decision within BT to make sure that that doesn't happen. Whereas I think some other companies are, just let the status quo remain. We'll have people come and go, but that would have happened anyway. But I think that there are definitely things that companies can do to direct that. And it sounds like that is happening at BT and other companies. I mean, I think one of the we spoke about it before, didn't we, Reece? One of the symptoms of a survey, it can be pointing out what's going wrong, but I think that there is a lot going right in the tech space, and we are reacting. We're having to react. Companies are having to react to attract that talent, aren't they? Otherwise, people are simply going elsewhere because they know they're in demand. Okay. Sure. If we move on to the next slide, so there does seem to be a clear disconnect between what tech workers want and what businesses are offering. A large proportion of companies are now offering more flexibility, but then maybe failing to realise that there are long-term ambitions of employees. So they need to start looking and double-checking that they have that clear progression and are clearer on the paths they're actually offering for employees if they want to retain them. So I think that's loud and clear from this survey. If we go to the next slide. So 3 in 10 workers say their employer is not delivering what workers really want. It's not maybe a huge surprise when only about 3 in 10 of tech leaders are gathering feedback and ideas to decide on what benefits to offer employees. And again, as is ever the way, missing salary information is a huge bugbear for applicants, and it's a particular concern for women. And I think there is that suspicion that they are maybe taking advantage of within the recruitment process to maybe take a lower salary. Where do you think, Sarah, I suppose with the scan of companies that you speak to, where do you think business is going wrong, and where do you think that they're actually beginning to or actually doing things well and have been doing things well?
I think in terms of, especially in terms of the salary, just that point, I think it just all comes down to transparency. I think a lot of businesses that aren't transparent is because there is something probably going on within the company that, they should probably fix in the first place in terms of salaries, that there's probably a wide disparity of salaries between even in just specific teams. And I think especially in a time of, this trying to close gender pay gaps, etc., I think it's very important to put it out there. And I think even just in my own work, I think it's very important to make sure salaries are displayed, and just, important to put out there that there are the clear points of a job spec and a description of what the role really is, because, it really does actually make a huge difference in terms of the recruitment process, for sure. I think with the candidates I speak to anyways.
Yeah, and I think promising something that isn't going to be the case just to get someone through the door, it's a false economy, isn't it? Because there's a lot.
It's just unethical, really. Yeah.
Literally,
yeah. Pretty much. Yeah. It's a really important point, I think, that one.
But I think the transparency piece is really important, and I know there's some great work done by a Tech Talent Charter. Really, if anybody wants to look into that further, then look up the Tech Talent Charter and become a signatory. Lots of companies give their information to Tech Talent Charter every year, and it means we can measure the salaries, the diversity, gender splits, but also recently ethnicity, they're throwing that in there. So it really lends itself to that transparency piece and gives you a kind of where you are on the scale. So that's an important point, I think. Dilani, I suppose, having looked through recently a lot of, well, maybe not a lot, but quite a few job specs. Do these chime with your frustrations, or actually did you have a different experience?
Yeah, like I could relate to that. I was quite frustrated at times when on LinkedIn, I've been looking for job roles and they just have a paragraph, unclear paragraph of like what the job description is. And then you compare it to other companies and you're thinking that if this company has spent a lot of time saying these are the requirements, this is desired, this is what is essential, and then like more about the company and the benefits, and spending a long time with like designing that compared to another company who's just written a paragraph without much information, obviously you're going to think that this is like not a really good company to work for. So therefore you go to apply for the job that has a very detailed description with salary mentioned as well, because depending on the job, like if it's remote, then I guess salary I don't know, but like if it's like quite far away, then I'd need to kind of calculate the costs and everything to travel there, and if it's like work out like living expenses and stuff, and see if the salary can work and if I can negotiate it. But salary does help a lot, and if salary is not mentioned, then I'll just think about it. But if I have a good job description,
suspicion as you start down that procedure, I suppose, isn't it? But just out of interest, what's your thoughts on the kind of augmenting those job descriptions with a bit of social media, a bit of a day in the life of? Is that a bit of fluff, or is it something that actually is really meaningful because you get inside and you can see what's happening on a day-to-day basis? What's your opinion of that? Because I know there's a lot of noise, and has been over the last 3-4 years. Would you say that that's important?
Yeah, like I definitely say that's important, because even with my company, it's a startup, and I tried to do a lot of research about the company, and there was nothing. There was no pictures. There was a few videos on YouTube, no social media. So then that was one of the reasons why I thought maybe it wouldn't be a good idea working for this company, because they have no publicity. Whereas if you look at companies such as BBC, the IET, for example, like they constantly post on social media. They have like employee stories, and you can see the progression, and you can see yourself working there, how the environment is, like diversity and things like that. Whereas if a company is not very active on social media or showing how like the offices is and what they provide, like the benefits and stuff, it's highly unlikely, especially young people. They're on social media a lot, and on LinkedIn a lot, trying to get the latest news. If they can't see this, then they're not going to think about it. They're going to look for a company that's appealing and where they can see themselves working there.
And more open, I suppose. We've got nothing to hide here. Have a look. Yeah. I suppose on a company the size of BT, how do you change that, Reace? Does that give you problems, or is that something you're very proud of that it exists? But I know that there's real barriers to overcome in larger companies, isn't there, in terms of, well, don't go there. How do you
I think for us, to the job advert first, I think one of the biggest challenges is that we see managers wanting to create a job advert to give detail of what the role is. And then the business stroke, the advertiser stroke, the recruiter will actually look at it and go, that's too complex and that's not going to attract. And so you've got a flex between a recruiter and the business. So I think that's first one thing to call out. And I think the recruiter side of things would say, we need to make it more human. We need to make it more engaging. We need to really help individuals understand the culture and what you're joining, rather than just what the job is. So I think there's a balance between the two. From a social media perspective, and I'm going to give them an shameless plug, we've actually partnered with a company called Kajigo to actually help young women and younger ethnicities actually really understand what it is to be an architect, what it is to be a computer programmer, not somebody who just codes all day. We've actually started to partner with them to get into schools at a younger age through their app, which is like almost a TikTok, if you like, where they can actually go and have a quick hit of understanding what these different tech roles are. We've got to start hitting this next generation of technologists at a much younger age. My daughter's 15. There is no way my 15-year-old daughter is going to be persuaded to take a career in tech. We need to be actually explaining at a much younger age. And so I think the whole social media, I think there is a huge potential and opportunity there for our next generations to really engage them in understanding what they're getting into. We've been really open and transparent with our attraction campaigns this year within BT, and we've been doing a lot more social media posts with real individuals in roles, being genuine. And I think that's the difference.
Yeah.
A big corporate can go out there and try and put themselves on these platforms, but it's the genuine message that comes from the individuals working in the business that will attract that talent to that business.
Yeah, some really interesting points there. And I think that point that I raised right at the beginning about 3% of women's first choice, it's a bit of a heartbreaker, really, isn't it, when we can see, I think, what was it, 20 to 21% of the tech workforce is female. A massive opportunity for businesses and the UK in general to up that closer to the 51% that it should be, and actually all of the benefits of working in tech. So with BT, with companies doing that, hopefully it will put that message across, and many organisations, Tech She Can, and many others trying to get that, push the agenda with younger females. Okay, if we move on to the next slide. So certainly these are some of the key points. Rewards and recognition is a big plus. Listening to what the actual workforce wants rather than just throwing out benefits that you think might resonate, and getting feedback on that. Flexible working options, I think, loud and clear on that, but also hybrid working options. Just because you can work 3 days a week, maybe you want to work those 3 days a week in an office, and I think it has become incredibly complex for employers to really be all things to all people. And sometimes I think you've just got to say, this is what it is, but remember that when we do it this way, there is this support, etc. And be authentic, which I suppose is going back to your point, Reace, about not glossing stuff, not making an advert, but giving a real life example of what happens within the business. And providing perks tailored to individual circumstances, which is easier in a smaller company than a larger one. But I think if you spend enough time, you can get the balance right on that. Would you agree with these? I mean, we've spoken about flexible working options, but providing perks to individual circumstances. Do the companies get that right, Sarah, or is that something which is still too broad brush?
Yes, I think it's on the way, I would say. I don't think we're there yet fully across the board, I'll be honest. But I think companies, as I said, are a lot more open because they know that this is the only way to get the talent that they want, is to be more inclusive and be more just able to accommodate the needs of, everyone in the business. As you mentioned, I think smaller companies definitely do it better, just because obviously of the scale of the business. But I think the more larger companies definitely need to figure out a way to accommodate this and sort of push this across the board for their members of staff.
Okay. Reace, would you agree it's more difficult for large companies to do it, or do you think there are definitely ways? Because I mean, the sums that they can throw at this could make things super attractive, couldn't they?
Yeah, I think it depends on what you class in your own mind as to what reward and recognition is, right? Within BT, I think the company has tried to use its buying power and having that large scale workforce to actually partner with lots of different companies, different John Lloyd gyms and things like that, so that individuals, if you're a gym fanatic, you can actually get huge discounts through the reward package, and they've tried to actually create it where an employee can go into a reward system. So we have our own reward system, and you almost every year tailor it to your needs, to what you want. I think that's great. It works really well for those individuals that can tailor those sort of perks, if you like, more than they are rewards, but they're almost perks as well. But I think it is very difficult on an individual scale to do that, and you have that tension a little bit, if I'm honest with you. We've heard it on the call today. You have the tension between every individual wants to be individual, but everybody individual wants to be treated the same. And so you've got this constant, and I see it all the time because the programs that I actually run, and trying to strike that balance between what are we rewarding here from a roles and responsibilities and capability, as to what are we rewarding from a, shall we say, accessible to all. So there's the two ends of the spectrum. I think the interesting thing that maybe as we move forward in into this sort of digital era, are we going to see more of that working as tribes and squads, so that we're not actually seeing within a team large differences in pay, that it is a team pay that we're looking at more in the future, and possibly that's what will actually start to balance out some of the pay or the reward within the different tech industries, to be honest.
That's a really interesting point, Reace. I think watch that closely as that progresses, because that's the first time I've kind of heard of that concept. Not that everybody necessarily needs to tell me, but that's a really interesting point and way of rewarding people on, this is the most important project, therefore it's going to get the most backing. Okay, if we move on to the next slide, this is when people get it right. Good work-life balance, certainly over half of people really responding to that. Transparent communication. I think there has been an improvement in that area, obviously with remote working, and just over half wanting additional training opportunities from their employer. I think this was a result, and feel free to counter me, but I think that this was a result of that feeling of stability and wanting security within the company, because I think in the UK we did a brilliant job of throwing our arms around employees to keep them for when we came out of the COVID crisis. But I think that's when people started thinking, well, if I'm going to stay here, I want to know that I'm still learning, and that becoming really, really important. Dilani, you're not nodding your head there in terms of, having just come out of a high kind of rate of learning, a high learning curve at university and apprenticeship, etc., that would still be really important to you, would it?
Yeah. Yeah, especially with like training and opportunities, even if like I've finished my apprenticeship and I've learned so much things over time, I'd still want opportunities for training, because for example, tech industry, it's always advancing. There's going to be new things coming up, and I would like to be trained, or there should be something offered within the company that could allow me to keep up to date with the newest technology. I know that some teams like work differently, and they move to use different approaches, or like products and stuff with like within the team. So it's nice to have that ability to have training and have time to be able to learn about things during work time to help develop over time as well.
And would you say that's more an on-demand issue? So when you're feeling that you want to move further in one area, you just kind of put your hand up, or would you like to see more of a quarterly, half-yearly basis? What would strike the right balance for you? Because there can be overkill in training. You've actually got the day job to do, haven't you?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because I know having too much training can be exhausting, and you need to meet deadlines and things like that. But like quarterly would make sense, because you still want to contribute as much within your team. You want to kind of do the best you can within your role. That's what your employer looks for as well. And to kind of have your role guaranteed, you need these trainings so you could be up to date and impact your team in some way. So having being able to do training regularly would help a lot. And you're doing something different for a day or two. And
yeah.
Yeah.
Change is as good as a rest kind of thing. But it also speaks back to Reese's point about the tension. About I'm an individual, but I want to be treated equally. I want to be trained, but I don't want to be overtrained. And it reminds me, Sarah, of when we were at the roundtable event a few weeks ago, and one of the slides was all about flexible working, hybrid working, etc., etc. And the next one of the other key points is when I go into the office, I want an amazing office environment. So I don't want to be there too much when I go in.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the most interesting points, I think, at the roundtables. I think people kind of want their cake and do want to eat it too, and I think they are in a position to require that. I think there's a lot more sort of roles than there are, that quality talent out there. So I think they're kind of leveraging that point, and it's fair enough. I mean, I would do the same.
Yeah, and I think this is again one of the points we need to get across to young talent that could be in tech. The options and the power you have is only going to increase. It's going to be a long time before we get that deficit filled of tech talent within the UK.
100%.
Dom, if I could just, I think I take a different view on it, if I'm completely honest with you, and it's for this one reason. If we look at what individuals want progression. Individuals want to be able to grow. And my experience, been in the industry some time now, is that those individuals that grow, those that individuals that really progress within their careers, are not those that are demanding what they think they're entitled to. It's actually those that are actually giving, those that are contributing, those that are taking into consideration others and dragging and pulling along the way others with them. And so that's what I see. So when I'm speaking to our younger generation within BT, I really do try to give this point of, it's not all about what you can gain or take. It's about what are you giving? What are you giving back to society? What are you giving back to getting more women into industry? What are you giving that is actually helping the whole of us as a community? Because we're a community, right?
Mm-hmm.
How are we actually driving that community forward? Because I think it could be a race to the bottom as to what we demand. And so we try to change that from a culture perspective as to what is it that I can contribute and what can I give. I understand that individuals want, right, because that's important, but it's trying to change that mindset as to how do we actually contribute to society, how do we contribute for the better good. I think
that's a really interesting point. I'll certainly bow to your experience in that, Reece, but and I think it also chimes with what Gen Z are saying they want from their employers. So there's a mirroring of how they act themselves. So that's a really interesting point to round the discussion off. I think if we just move to the last slide, some actionable advice here. Feel free to kind of counter if you see anything you don't agree with, but personalised rewards and benefits, learning and development, focusing on that flexibility, getting the salaries right, getting the transparency, and again, TTC, Tech Talent Charter, really helpful in that area. A culture of certainty, security, certainty in what your company does and how it affects the world around, and if it does that with real authenticity. Clear communication, so people know your company's point of view on issues that arise, as we've seen some huge issues over the last 2-3 years really taking a hold. And I think that modern CEOs, modern communication departments need to be in step with those to make sure that the workforce are engaged with it. And that DE&I mindset when hiring, lots of data-led tools to help that, but also going down as far as what's the DE&I breakdown of your recruitment team, helping to change that unconscious bias. If everybody's the same on the recruitment team, chances are they could be recruiting exactly the same people as them, or a stock personality type. So anything to add on those takeaways, Dilani? Anything that you'd love to have seen, or do they kind of cover things off? Any opinions on those?
I do, this is yeah, I do agree with everything. Training, especially because as a degree apprentice, for example, you're coming out of school and you have no experience in anything, you don't know anything. And I'm happy that BBC were able to provide training courses to get that insight in that product or that software or tech. And like, yeah, and I'm glad that was mentioned there. And then, yeah, and flexibility as well. I know that as apprentices, we weren't allowed to work from home, but then because of the pandemic, we were given that opportunity. It was also quite new, and we weren't used to working from home, but then it took us time to getting used to. And then after completing my apprenticeship, going into this new role, I knew how working from home, like hybrid working works. So that's good. And I guess like I want to highlight that with an apprenticeship scheme, like there needs to be a plan. Like I hope that employers, they have like everything pre-planned and not just like doing it because they need to, in a way. Because I know that with my one, like I was one of the fortunate ones, but ideally you're meant to be in the same team for like the whole of the apprenticeship program. But then me, like my team couldn't no longer have me, my first team, so then I had to move to a different one. And then they couldn't have me either for like a few months. Then I had to move to a different one. And then my third team, so I was with them. And towards the end of my apprenticeship, my line manager spoke to them, are you able to take her in? And then they said, like, we don't have the space. And it took them, like, my line manager then had to speak to all the teams within the BBC London to see if they're hiring any junior positions. So that's when, like, everything started, you know, getting confusing to me. Like, am I going to get a guaranteed job? Like, or already like throughout my apprenticeship scheme, like I've been moving around, whereas other apprentices were fortunate to be in that same team and then get a job straight away within their team. So it's nice to see like if like, you know, apprenticeship employers are, they think things through and like make sure it can go ahead. I know things can happen, but it's always nice to have like, you know, something guaranteed towards the end, because I think that like as a young person, you want things to be guaranteed. You're coming out to this working industry and you need that like assurance that there is something after you've completed it, that hard work.
The beginning of that culture of certainty. And I think that you know, Reace spoke very eloquently about the BT scheme in terms of, I think you were quite shocked when you, Reace, in hearing that, you know, without a guarantee of it at the end. So having that kind of 2, 3, 4, 5 year plan as to what this person is going to be doing gives that culture of certainty. So yeah, any final thoughts, Sarah, Reace?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think I would agree as everyone else that these are pretty much the main points that I think employers should be covering. I think what's quite important to highlight is I think some employers might focus just on one area, but I think it's important to kind of encompass as many of the points as you can, if not all, to create a sort of full offering. I mean, there's, you know, perks such as, you know, beer fridge and free Pilates, yoga, whatever it is, are really important. However, if you know you're not hitting the salary benchmarking, you're not, there's no D&I and there's no, it doesn't make sense to focus on just one point of it. I think the whole sort of group of these sort of strategies is important to offer on the whole. And I think it's important not to just put a band-aid over wider issues and actually tackle each issue individually. It might take time. It's not something that might happen straight away, but I think it should be something that is being actioned as soon as possible, because it's important. It is important.
Yeah. And it's almost no priorities with it. These are the full scope of what has to be done as almost a minimum standard. Reace, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think I completely agree, Sarah. You've got to take it as a whole. But one area that I would sort of like really drill down on would be the adoption of D&I mindset. Twofold, really. If you're not doing it as a business, then you really need to get on board and get on board quickly, is the reality of it, because we need to ensure that, as you explained there, Don, we even in our assessment centres, every single individual assessing has that full D&I training as well as interview techniques training, and we've seen a huge improvement in our statistics around the conversion ratios in there, which is brilliant, and it's lovely to see, if I'm completely honest with you. But what I would say is be very careful that you don't put so much energy and effort trying to get that right that you forget what happens when the individual comes in. You need to be really clear as to what does your business actually look like. There is nothing worse than coming into an office and being the only black person in the office, right? You need to really take a step back and take a little bit of a look into the business. What does it actually look like now? And when we do attract this talent, what are we going to do to be able to support that inclusive environment once they get here as well?
Yeah, and a nicely emphatic point at the end. Thank you very much for that, Reace. Sarah, Dilani, Reace, thanks so much for your involvement today. Certainly, I've learned a couple of things myself, and that's great. And I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope the people at home have enjoyed that. You can access more insights. Just jump on the link right at the bottom there, and feel free to contact us at CWJobs if you want any more information on that, and contact any of us on LinkedIn. But once again, thank you so much, and we'll call a halt there.
CW Jobs, the home for tech jobs.